Coming to you from Wide Receiver Town, USA. It is Draft Day Live, DNVR Draft Day Live, brought to you by MSU Denver. Make sure you check out msudenver.edu/online and make sure you check out all they have to offer. All right, well, a long 3 days have gone by. The Broncos have 10 new players, many of them coming today. So let's not waste any time and start in with the very first pick that the Broncos, well, let's just go over all the picks they made today quickly. And I've only mastered the pronunciation on one of them, but it's the best one. Albert Okwuegbunam. Albert Okwuegbunam out of the University of Missouri is the first pick of the fourth round today for the Broncos. And man, I absolutely love this pick, but we'll get back to that one. The next pick, Justin Strnad, linebacker out of Wake Forest. Next pick is Netane Muti out of Fresno State, a guard with a really high ceiling. Wide receiver Tyree Cleveland, love him. Very easy to say. That's the reason why I love him. And, of course, the last pick here at the very end of the seventh round is an edge guy out of North Dakota State, Derrek Tuszka. So there you go. There is the Broncos haul from here on day 3. And thank you to the graphics people for going through that so quickly as I was rushing through. Let's go back, though, to my guy here, Albert Okwuegbunam. I already messed it up. Albert Okwuegbunam. That is the pick there for the Broncos in the fourth round. And my goodness, if you didn't already know that they were just hammering down on Drew Lock, that is the pick to really drive it home.
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, was it irresponsible to go offense on, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 picks? I mean, that doesn't sound that bad out of the 10. But
no,
when you
4
look
out of your top 6.
Yeah, see, that part sounds a little bit worse, but I don't think it's a bad idea. That offense needed to be better. And, you know, improving inside and the interior on the trenches, like, that's important, but just load up on weapons. They did it. I'm pretty happy.
I mean, we've been begging the Broncos to do this for, I think, since I've been running the draft pod and our draft coverage, essentially, to just load up on weapons. Let's add more speed to this offense. They did that at wide receiver. Now they add the fastest tight end of this class, more than just a tight end. He can be moved out the backfield as that H-back without Janovich on this team anymore. I think there's an opening there. He can be flexed out wide, of course, because he runs and has the size and hands of a big wide receiver and can even be a valuable weapon in the slot. So now you could even unleash 3 tight end looks that are really going to feel more like 4 wide type looks. The options are endless with 2 wide receivers who can easily fit in the slot or outside because of that speed. Fant and Albert O now as your flex tight ends. The options are endless for this offense. It's going to be really hard to match up with all these weapons.
Yeah, well, and with the second tight end in particular, you know, this is something that we had talked about just before the draft, Dre. I was kind of on team if there's a tight end there and it seems like good value, go get him. And I think you were a little bit more reserved, but I love that pick. I mean, obviously he has the chemistry with Drew Lock, which is super important. But even outside of that, we know that this is typically a one tight end offense that Pat Shurmur runs. I don't know that that's going to change just because there is now a second tight end, or third if you want to count Nick Vannett. But I think that what sometimes gets overlooked is that even though there's only one tight end, that tight end is really crucial to the offense. And if something were to happen to Noah Fant, or, you know, knock on wood, Noah Fant doesn't pan out, something like that, now all of a sudden you have some insurance. You have somebody there who can step into that role. Plus, there are plenty of other ways you can use them during more normal times too.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite picks of the whole class, honestly. You know, it starts with the chemistry with Drew Lock. But then, I mean, the second you see that 40 time, I was blown away last year that Noah Fant at 6'4" and 250 pounds ran a 4.5. I mean, I couldn't stop talking about that. I pounded that into the ground talking about that. Well, this is a guy who's 6'5" and nearly 260, and he ran a 4.49. Now, that does not make him better than Noah Fant by any stretch of the mind, but it does really open up the way that you can use him. And he's not necessarily a great route runner. He's not, he doesn't have a lot of shake to him, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need that from him. You're going to put him out there. Teams are going to want to match up Noah Fant with their best coverage linebacker or safety. And whoever the second best out there at covering tight ends is going to be stuck trying to run with Albert O. So I promised I wouldn't do that. Albert Okwuegbunam. So this is, to me, just making yourself more dangerous. And I said this on Twitter. You could go 5 wide. You could go 5 wide right now and have 2 tight ends out there and have Cortland Sutton be the slowest player on the field in terms of a weapon. That to me is scary. Obviously not all of these guys are guarantees to pan out. And, history would tell us that probably one of them won't. But just the thought right now of most of these guys working out, even if, it's just Judy and Okwuegbunam, like there's so many different combinations here that are going to make life so tough for these opposing defenses.
Yeah, that's really the bottom line, as the combinations are endless. And as we see this highlight tape, the speed and ability to separate as a tight end is easy to see. I mean, frankly, he looks like a big wide receiver without much loss in speed. And then you can see the athleticism and these ball adjustments he's able to make, leaping ability that he has. He's really an intriguing weapon. And it's why I had him as my second ranked tight end in the class, because just polishing up on some more guys in the class, watching more SEC defenses, it was like, yeah, Albert O, he might have had a down year with that change at quarterback, but he's still one of the more special, dynamic receiving weapons out of this tight end class. And he was one of only 2 top 100 tight ends who I see as a potential future starter in kind of more of a niche role, but still an important contributor to an offense. And to be able to get him in the 4th round, I thought was just great value.
Here's my next favorite part about this is that John Elway woke up this morning, said, you know what? I really like this Albert Okwuegbunam. Drew did play with him. You know what? I'm going to call up my guy Drew and see what he thinks about him. And I tweeted this out. This does not always happen. I mean, this is how you ended up with Cody Latimer and Peyton Manning, is you didn't talk to Peyton about that. So, you call up your quarterback who has experience with this guy, and obviously that is different from Cody Latimer, but you call him up, you find out how he feels about it, and then you go from there. And then I loved what John said. Once Drew gave us his seal of approval, we knew that was our pick there in the 4th round. I just love that they're being open and honest here about the fact that they're building around Drew. This is Drew Lock's football team.
And going back to the value of Albert Okwuegbunam, I mean, Dre mentioned that he had a bit of a down year this year, but what a perfect scenario for him to slip as far as he did because of a down year, and have that down year be caused by the fact that he lost his quarterback, who he is now being reunited with. Right. In his 18 games. I mean, so by down year, by the way, that means he dropped from 43 catches to 26 and 466 yards to 306. My favorite stat, though, in 18 games that he played while Drew Lock was the quarterback, he caught 17 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you don't even factor in the Drew Lock stuff, this is still a really nice pick for me. When you add all that in, it's really an extraordinary pick, especially with his versatility. I think, where he's really going to be able to make an immediate impact is as an H-back. And that's where the possibilities are pretty scary with this guy and Phil or Melvin Gordon out the backfield, Fant, wherever you want to put him, those 2 dynamic receivers. That's really good luck lining up against this sneaky little fullback you have in the backfield. Turns out to be a dynamic tight end who runs a 4.4.
Now, here is the one thing I worried about, and I guess we should have had a graphic ready for when I make a relationship comparison, but I guess this will have to do. If you're Noah Fant, you just found out that the person that you're building this relationship with just heard that their ex, who they didn't really break up with, they just got separated, just came back in town. I feel like you just have to be a little bit worried that, oh my God, is Drew going to fall in love with Albert Okwuegbunam and I'm going to lose my targets? Now, I'm sure that would be an overreaction, but it does worry me a little bit just to think that, oh man, Noah Fant might be a little bit worried. The ex just jumped back into town.
I think it's really more of a baby mama type deal. The baby mama, after co-parenting long distance, now she's back in town. And, it's a lot of, don't worry, boo, I'm with you. We're just co-parenting. It's just going to be more convenient having them close by. Yeah, let's see when we hit the practice field, who's getting the favoritism and a few more looks and, touches here. Because I think you're onto something. Noah might be the least excited about this move.
Yeah, and hopefully, there we go. There's a nice relationship graphic. Shout out to Love is Blind. Great job, Bruno. I can see you working on that behind the scenes. Well done. Yeah, I mean, in the end, competition is a good thing. And so I'm not trying to say that that this is a bad thing if Noah Fant's not excited. He just has to be like, that's a little odd. Hopefully, this doesn't take away touches for me because obviously Noah Fant led all NFL rookies at tight end in terms of yards and catches last year. So he's off to a promising start. Hopefully, these two just play really well off each other. And we know that Pat Shurmur loves to use a receiving tight end. So this will be good for both of them.
Yeah, he's got two. This is not a great, if you're Fumagalli, Jake Butt, Andrew Beck, Jeff Hireman, these are tough. This is a tough pick for that group, though.
Yeah, and to tie a bow on this, I guess let's take a stab at what the Broncos tight end room will look at come week 1.
Well, how many spots do you think we're working with? Set the parameters for us, Rye.
If you're gonna use one as an H-back and that's how you're going to sell it in your head, I could see a way that you could get to 4. But otherwise, it's probably going to be 3. So we'll just say 4 for the purposes of this exercise because there's a lot to choose from. So I think the first 3 are really obvious. Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam, and, of course, Nick Vanette, who you just went out and signed. So that leaves Jeff Hireman, Troy Fumagalli, Jake Butt, and
Andrew Beck.
Along with, you got the guy from Wyoming last year, Austin Fort, Bug Howard in the mix. You can pretty much count those guys out. But to me, if I had to guess which one of those guys survives, I think it would probably be Troy Fumagalli.
Oh, interesting. I would have said Beck just based on the playing time they got last year, but I'd love to hear what you think Fumagalli.
No, you're right. I like Beck. I like Beck better.
Okay. Hank, are you with us or you want to split the difference there?
I'd go with it's tough. I think Vanette is a lock. Vanette has to be a lock because you signed him. Fant is obviously a lock. Okwuegbunam's a lock. I think behind that, it's just so open. Beck makes the most sense because he's so versatile. You have Hireman, who's the most experienced. He's a good run blocker. I think you keep Beck, and it's 50-50. You keep Hireman as well.
Wow.
I think Hireman is a dead man walking, honestly. Just because they can save money by moving on from him. All these other guys are on rookie deals. He's the one who has legitimate money on his contract that they can move on from and save a little bit of money. So I think that probably plays a decent role in this. But man, imagine, going from such a weak tight end group just a couple of years ago to now a group that includes 2 guys who run sub 4.5 at over 250 pounds. A guy like Beck, who I thought built a nice little relationship with Drew Lock, being your third of that group. And then, of course, Nick Vanette being kind of the wild card here, obviously going to play. Maybe Beck is the fourth. Vanette's the third, or Vanette is the second, depending on. But you got enough space to wiggle around here. And the good news for Beck is he can also play both positions there at fullback and tight end.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he's so valuable. But you're right. I mean, they tried to patch it up with third-round picks. Now they've said, screw it. We're getting great athletes, and we'll even add some free agents. We don't care. We're just fixing this position for good now.
All right, before we finish the analysis on this pick, Andre, what was your grade for the pick of Albert Okwuegbunam?
I think this is a solid B+. Really based on pure value, the 100th prospect on my board at pick 118 could even deserve an A. How he fits in, the fact that they passed up maybe some bigger needs to just add another weapon at a tight end room that was pretty full. That takes it away from the A, but I think there's a project in mind. I think the lock connection is huge, and the value is great. So it's a solid B+.
Yeah, I'm pretty on board with you there. It's hard for me to how do you do these grades, as we're going to go through your grade of everyone here? How much are you thinking value? How much are you thinking the player in a vacuum? What's your kind of formula there?
Really, for me, just keep it simple, because I try to analyze all picks the same to have a little bit more of a standard. It really comes down to value of the pick first and foremost. What I had him graded, for me, Albert O was projected as a third-round grade, which is a future NFL starter within that rookie contract, so within the first 4 years. So I think that's prime value here. The fit also factors in, and I think that's also a good fit. The need, I think, is kind of, average or maybe slightly below value. So those are the three things I try to take into account. 75% of that grade, though, is really based on the value. The other 25 is fit and need.
All right, let's move on here to the next pick. This was in the 5th round at pick number 178. Linebacker Justin Strnad out of Wake Forest. And this is an interesting one. I got to be honest. Did not love it at first. And I'm still not totally in love with it. But, the first thing you do is you pull up these guys' profile. You look at their testing numbers. His testing numbers were very, very unimpressive. And that's when I started scratching my head. A 4.74 40. His RAS score, his relative athletic score, is very low, in the 3s. A lot of things that were just popping out at me is, I don't like this. But to not completely trash the pick, then I turned on a little bit of his tape, and I thought, what am I watching here? Who is this guy in relation to the guy I just saw in all these numbers? Because he looks a lot more athletic on the field than he does in those testing numbers. And, just to put into perspective some of what I saw, he sacked Lamar Jackson 2 different times. So, 4.7 speed or not, he was able to track down, the fastest guy maybe that he ever played against. So, again, every play is different, but I was shocked to see that after seeing, man, this guy doesn't look very athletic. When you put on the tape, he looks a lot more athletic than that.
Yeah, he's a guy who I was pretty excited about when he got picked. I think I, like a lot of other people, was expecting like Prince Tega Wanagoo, somebody like that, to be selected. But when I saw Strnad's name pop up on my phone, I was pretty pumped. We haven't spent a lot of time on him on the draft podcast, but whenever we talk about the linebackers, I feel like there's been at least a half dozen times where I've at least thrown out there, like, Strnad's a good athlete that you pay attention to at this time. And he's a guy that I've been looking for when I run through these mock drafts, sometimes at 118. This is a B pick at worst for me. If you like Troy Dye, then I think you should really like what you get from Strnad as well. Very similar players, very rangy, very long, very athletic. When you see some of the interceptions that Strnad gets, it's not. I mean, a lot of the time it seems like it's because the quarterback thinks that he can get the ball over Strnad because he's a linebacker. So there's no way he can get his arms up that high or jump high enough, but he is that type of athlete that makes plays that quarterbacks don't expect him to be able to make. I mean, obviously there are some questions about him playing the run game, and the 40 time wasn't great. It was rough, but I am very excited. I think that he's a great piece to try to develop, and I think that he could have a role in this defense pretty quickly.
So quickly before you talk, Andre, where is the divide here? What's going on? Like, you're watching this tape here, and this looks like an athletic linebacker. You look at some of the scouting reports out on the internet, and the first line of all of these is great athlete, rangy, sideline to sideline, and it's like, what isn't adding up here? Did he just have a bad day at the combine?
Well, yeah, maybe we should be looking at football players instead of what they can do in their underwear. It's very obvious what he is capable of doing, and I felt that way about a couple of these guys, but I'm excited by this pick.
Yeah, I think a bit of the divide there is he looks the part, he moves well. He's also smooth. I really like that. He's a smart player. He doesn't take bad angles or overrun anything. He's in the right spot. He's not overdoing anything. Can maybe be just a little tentative. So he moves well, but I think the problem is that combine really hurt his stock because he's a team captain. He produced well the last 2 years at Wake in the ACC. The tape is pretty good. You see some promising stuff, especially to fit in the modern NFL. But then with that profile to not test well, to test as an average or even below average athlete, that hurt his stock significantly. For me, was just out of the range of the draftable graded players. I think the size is average. I think the athleticism from how he tested is average. I don't like the way he operates coming downhill. Not a guy who plays with his hair on fire. Sideline to sideline, he's good, but he doesn't fly either. In coverage, he has good range. I also see kind of inconsistent instincts, ball skills, eye discipline, which of course we talk about so much with DBs in coverage and stuff. So he needs to refine a lot of stuff, but I love the Troy Dye comp. I mean, that just jumps out at you anytime you see him. He really looks like Troy Dye. And I think that's what the Broncos saw. They saw a worthwhile gamble and a guy who at worst will be a solid rotational linebacker who can do something in special teams for you, and you're not going to be completely screwed if you have to put him on the field because injuries are mounting up, and there's some upside to be developed a little if you can refine more things, especially in coverage.
And to me, this is the first linebacker the Broncos have drafted under Vic Fangio, so I'm giving him a big benefit of the doubt there with the idea that, okay, Vic Fangio must like the kid, or else they wouldn't be drafting him here. We got Andrew Mason. Let's bring on Andrew Mason into the fold. And Mace, we're going through kind of pick by pick here, so we'll quickly interrupt, and then we'll get back into our pick by pick analysis. Just quickly, without going into too much player by player detail, how do you feel about the Broncos' Day 3 haul?
I think it was pretty solid. Honestly, I'm not terribly thrilled with Tyree Cleveland in the 7th round. I thought that they could have gotten him undrafted, and I don't know that he really has much of a shot to make the team. It's not a great shot given what's in that room. I think they could have gone for another position. I think they could have gone for an Alex Taylor out of South Carolina State, gotten a developmental tackle in there. But I mean, the Albert O pick. That's a solid pick, and what I want to see him do is become a more refined route runner, and he's going to see a lot more traffic than he did when he was at Mizzou. A lot of the plays that he made there came when he was wide open, and Drew Lock found him. He's not going to have that sort of luxury in the NFL, so he's got a little bit of a ways to go there, but he's got the trust, he's got the timing with Drew Lock, so I think that's going to help him out immensely. I really think when I was listening to Dre there, and reading sort of how he had Strnad graded, I gotta get that name right. Are we saying?
Yeah, right.
Strnad. Yeah, it's never rolled off the tongue because I look at it and I see Strand, but
yeah,
it's interesting to consider him in light of last year. Remember when the Broncos took Justin Hollins?
Mhm.
He was
Yep.
an edge, but they were saying, well, he's got some coverage ability. Maybe he can make a transition inside linebacker, but he really struggled at times, even though he had all the athletic measurables. It didn't really click for him last year. Now you bring in somebody who did not test well at the combine. In fact, his 40 time is within 1/100th of a second of Danny Trevathan's 40 time back in 2012. And I think that's something that's really interesting. Now, there are different types of linebackers. Trevathan's going to do a bit more in the box. Strnad is more of somebody who does well in coverage, but in both cases, the film far outstrips what they showed in their underwear, in the parlance of John Fox. And so I think with him compared to, say, Justin Hollins, you're gambling more on the film and knowing that he has a specific tool in his skill set that he can use very well. And because it's coverage, that's something that's pretty hard to find. I really actually like that pick. And as I took the time to watch quite a bit of him this afternoon, in that big gap between the two picks there in round 5 and round 6 and on into round 7, the more I watched of him, the more I liked him. I thought he played a lot faster than a 4.7, 4.40 would indicate. He's not going to be a thumper in the box, but guys, I think it's possible that he's the Broncos' best coverage linebacker by the end of the season.
Yeah, and again, we always talk about it with the combine. The combine should confirm what you want to happen is the combine confirms what you see on tape. When it doesn't happen, that's when you have to ask questions. So if a guy looks slow and then he runs really fast at the combine, well, you ask questions, why? What's going on here? If a guy plays fast and then runs slow, you ask the same question. And clearly for the Broncos, the questions were answered. Whatever that question was, why does he look so much faster on the field? In the end, you're going to let field speed be the tiebreaker there. So the pick here to me got better and better, especially as I turned on the tape. And that's the best thing. You don't want to say, well, I turned on the tape and it wasn't very great. But then I saw the testing numbers and I said, okay, I like the pick. It's better the other way around. So, Andre, as we finish up here and tie a bow on Justin Strnad, what was your grade of the pick?
Yeah, ended up being a C-. I'm not enamored with the value of this pick, but clearly the fit is really nice with his ability and coverage. The need obviously was there. We've been pounding that for a couple years now to add a little more ability and coverage at linebacker. Don't think it was a great value at 178. But take that with a grain of salt. Grading a 5th round pick is relative. That's only going to play so much into the general overall grade of this Broncos class.
Yeah, and the way I kind of feel about day 3 is if you have guys, just get them. Just go get your guys. Forget about what value. I usually say forget about how many picks you have. Just make sure you get your guys. Well, the Broncos decided to hold on to all of them at the exact spot that they had.
Yeah.
But, just if you have a guy that you like, you're getting close to him on the board, go ahead and go get him. And this definitely seems like that sort of scenario. And I hope Mace is right that he ends up being a legitimate coverage backer. The best thing you could have said to me is that he's like Troy Dye, and I think the tape does confirm that. I love Troy Dye, and I definitely liked the tape on Strnad. All right, let's move on to Netane Muti out of Fresno State, the guard here. This one is kind of a 2017 style John Elway pick here, which when I say 2017 and draft in the same sentence, people, start pulling their hair out. But I'll tell you why I am a little bit more okay with this pick than, say, what they did with Jake Butt back in 2017. In 2017, the Broncos needed a tight end. They were very weak at the position. They were not getting any production out of the passing game from tight ends. And they needed to add there, and they got Jake Butt, and it never panned out, and they did not help themselves in that regard in any way with that pick. With Muti here, I think at least you can sell it as, okay, well, we don't need a guard, and this guy has 2nd round or even maybe higher potential. Let's take a flyer here. If he doesn't pan out, it doesn't put us in a hole. If he does, now all of a sudden we have a luxury with 4 really good players for 3 spots.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to go about it. I thought this was a phenomenal pick. I really love this. He was my top rated guard in the class, 4th best interior lineman in the class. You put on the Fresno State tape when he was playing the last few years. He pops completely. You see him move great in space. And I mean, he's a bad MF coming downhill. True mauler. He's just got this really compact build, great knee bend, violent hips, obviously just a crazy finisher, great run blocker. But where he really impressed me and kind of separated himself from the rest of the guard class, aside from those movement skills and what he can do in the running game, is really how well he played at left tackle when used out there for Fresno State, just moving seamlessly in pass protection. He's just a dude. I mean, he totally would have been a top 50 pick if these injuries weren't a concern. Now they are a major concern because he's only had 1 healthy season of the 4 he's been at Fresno State. He could have come back for another year, declared early, and really jumped on my radar, and I fell in love. And bumped him down a little bit because of the injuries, but I'm no doctor. If this guy gets on the field, I think you have a stud, and he couldn't grade out lower than a 3rd round grade for me, just based off the tape and everything else. Frankly, I think he's good enough. He could stick to tackle if length wasn't an issue. He has below 32-inch arms. Usually below 34-inch arms is a non-starter. So forget below 32-inch. But still, I mean, I just love everything about him. Look at him here against SEC competition at left tackle, just moving seamlessly. Great anchor. I mean, I just love everything about this guy.
Well, just watch the way he blows. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just to say quickly, when your name is Dre, do not ever admit that you aren't a doctor.
Oh, yeah, fair. Well, good advice.
The thing that kind of jumped out to me, first of all, one of the guards that I liked who did not have the same health concerns. In fact, this guy was durable. He's a 4-year starter. Was Kevin Dotson out of Louisiana Lafayette. And he was just mauling people throughout his career and did that down at the Shrine, just pushing people out of the way. Well, Muti does the same thing to a higher degree with even more power, and he's got quicker feet. And he's got the flexibility to bounce outside and play left tackle in a pinch. It's not what you want him to do. Really, I mean, this is all about injuries. This pick, I mean, you could basically say this is the Greek pick. This is Steve Antonopoulos, and John Elway on his Zoom conference with media talked about how they did the cross checks with Greek, and they brought him in and they asked him, what they thought of what the medicals were. So this is. It is a roll of the dice, but that's what you do on day 3. I'm not sure that there's that among the guards. If you said, okay, they're all healthy, I don't think there's a guard that you'd want more in this draft class than him. If you're talking about when they're healthy, the only reason he's sitting there in round 6 is the injury concern. And again, he doesn't have to play. You've got starters on the interior. You can go ahead and make that commitment, and you can see where he goes. And if he blossoms, it's a nice bonus. And who knows? I mean, if let's say things go to hell over at left tackle, and Muti is healthy and he's ready to step in and play at guard, you do have the flexibility in a pinch to put Dalton Reisner out to left tackle. I know it's not ideal. It's not what you want, but you do have that option.
I loved what John Elway had to say about the Achilles. He said that Greek basically said after you operate on the Achilles, it only gets stronger. And in the parlance, as Mace would say, of Dre, I'm not a doctor, so I'll take Greek's word on that. So that's a bit encouraging. And then, of course,
Demarius told us about that, by the way.
What?
Because Demarius had an Achilles injury back in 2011. Now, 2 decades ago, Dan Marino ruptures his Achilles, and he's moving around with a little bit of a hobble. But we are in different times now. You can repair that Achilles, and it really can be stronger. And it didn't affect Demaryius Thomas. It didn't affect Emmanuel Sanders, and he had it late in his career. And I think that it's not going to affect Muti. I'm actually more concerned about the Lisfranc than the Achilles.
Yeah, and I mean that's the most recent injury, so I think it's fair. He says when he talked to us that the foot felt great. Man, he had some serious energy on that call. I was digging it. He was so thankful, so happy to be drafted, and he said it feels great. Doctors are feeling good about the progress, so you can really, really, really be patient here. That's one of my favorite things about this pick is there's no rush. Just wait. Be patient, make sure he's completely healthy before you force him to do anything and see if it pans out.
Yeah, with all these picks, is this almost like in the NBA we have a draft and stash picks where you draft European guys just to keep them out there and not have to free up a roster spot? Is this a draft and IR pick for the Broncos? Free up that roster spot from the start, and maybe he doesn't even have to be used. Roster spot doesn't have to be used on this guy till 2021.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously it's a great pick. One of the most exciting in the draft, I think, because of all the reasons you guys have talked about, because he is developmental, because they were in a position where they could have gone after a tackle they didn't like as much and said, that's where we really need somebody. And that's where we're going to get somebody to try to develop. But they didn't. And I like that. They said, this is the best player we think. This guy has the best chance to be an important piece of our team 2 years from now. And we are going to get him and develop him and turn him into what he can be. That's how you play day 3 of the draft.
Yeah, this is an interesting pick. I just don't feel comfortable with the injury picks after the history here, but I certainly, like I said, day 3, go get your guys. If they don't pan out, well, that's kind of what was supposed to happen anyway. So I like taking a risk here. We've got Zach on the line as well. Let's bring Zach in and bring you in on the conversation here about Netane.
Hey, first, should we welcome my hair into the conversation?
I want
too high out of the frame.
What color is that polo shirt, by the way? Are we calling that like salmon?
Pink. So yeah, I guess it could fall into salmon, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a bold move there, my friend.
Real men wear pink. Right.
I look like it.
But, yeah. Is it Muti?
Muti.
With a T or a D? I know it's spelled with a T. Muti.
Yeah.
Muti.
No, still got it wrong.
Muti.
Muti.
Now that we're doing this,
better.
I think maybe Fangio approved the pick because he thought he was Italian.
There we go. I gotta say,
Muti.
overall, love what the Broncos did. Absolutely hate the all nightmare team that they put together for Zach Stevens. This is going to be a big struggle for me to get all these guys' names down. Oh boy. Starting with Muti, I guess.
Yeah, you got it down now.
There we
let's
go.
do the first name.
Spelling his name is the easy part. I mean, that's one of the easier names. It's Albert O, where my spell check starts doing cartwheels.
and my brain doing cartwheels. But Muti, I love it. I mean, just like you guys were saying, this is a spot where the Broncos could take that extremely high upside guy. And there's no need to rush him because you have Cushenberry at center, you have Glasgow, and you have Reisner at guard. What happens, though, if he becomes a guy that stays healthy and accountable? You obviously have Reisner here for a while. Cushenberry is the center, and Muti isn't a center. And you have Glasgow here for 4 years. I mean, maybe I'm probably getting way too ahead of myself, but I'm thinking, man, if everything goes right, how is he going to get on the field? And how does that shake out?
Someone's got to play tackle, Zach. You know it. You know the answer.
Or, you have too many offensive linemen and you get to trade one of them and pick up more draft capital. How nice does that sound?
How about a guard for a tackle?
Or you just have a good backup lineman for the first time in years.
Yeah, that's a foreign idea.
Whew.
Yeah, I guess they could try the Trey Turner for Russell Okung type trade and just try to flip a guard for a tackle. Let's hope your good friend Tom Telesco is ready on the other line to take that.
Exactly. I thought it was a good, not spin by John Elway, because I think he was telling the truth about what Greek said, what Ryan mentioned earlier. And that's certainly the positive way of viewing this. But when you have a guy that's played one full season, I'm glad that the Broncos aren't relying on him to come in and be a key part of this team. But I love his upside, just like everyone does.
Yeah, really, really interesting pick here. Again, I do get 2017 vibes, but I hope it doesn't end up working out that way. I hope that this pans out for them and he ends up being a beast. All right, Andre, your grade of the pick.
Well, clearly I love this. This is one of 2 picks that I had ranked in my top 200 that were done today. So it's an A for me.
Woo! The crowd goes wild.
Ties Judy and below only Cushenberry for a better grade. I think it's a great fit. I love the upside. Great value at this point. A need, quite debatable. Obviously still a need on the offensive line. Not exactly at guard, but still, it's an A grade here.
All right, an A grade. What did you have him on your board?
He
60th?
was 72nd.
72nd. PFF had him at 37th on their board.
Yeah. I mean, they clearly do not take injuries into account. What would he have been? Their top prospect if injuries weren't a factor? They would have taken him over Chase Young and Joe Burrow?
Yeah.
Sounds insane.
Be careful. Did PFF love Will Greer last year?
Yeah, I mean, they've got some weird.
It's always, they always have the outlier board. They're the Seattle
totally.
Seahawks of media draft big boards.
Yes, that's true.
All right, let's move on to the next pick here, and that one is a lot easier to pronounce. That one's just Tyree Cleveland, and this is another wide receiver. I mean, I can't believe they ended up using one of these picks on a wide receiver, but to me, they just held on to these picks to basically take undrafted guys that they thought were going to go undrafted, that they wanted. John Elway said it before the draft and said, hey, look, the hardest part of this new draft is going to be going after the college free agents. And to me, that's why they ended up holding on to these last 2 picks. They just said, well, let's see who's there, who's going to be left, and who's going to be a college free agent, and pick one of the guys we like. And they always add wide receivers as UDFA. So that's why they go with Tyree Cleveland here. Easily the most impressive part about him is his leaping ability, almost a 40-inch vertical on Tyree Cleveland. So definitely some high upside traits.
Former 4-star recruit, top 50 on ESPN's 100. I remember him being a hot commodity on National Signing Day that year out of Houston Texans. He's, over 6'2". He's got 4.4 speed, great leaping ability you talked about, was a big weapon for them as a freshman, I believe, averaging over 20 yards per reception. And then, Van Jefferson transfers from Tennessee to Florida. They've got a guy like Freddie Swain who got drafted today as well. They had no quarterback, no passing game to speak of. He got really lost in the shuffle. His numbers declined slowly but surely at every season of his career. I thought he flashed at points at the Senior Bowl. I believe he was kind of a late filler. He's a size speed guy that is a priority free agent, and with a pick in the 250s, I can understand that selection. I would have prioritized other wide receivers like Strnad. He was the first of the non-draftable grades among the wide receivers in this class for my rankings.
I think there are some parallels between him and Juwan Winfrey too. I mean, in terms of the skills, the skill set isn't exactly the same, but a player who does have some fascinating tools. Got lost in the shuffle. The production wasn't there. You're right. He was an addition to the roster down in Mobile back in January. But if you're talking about having the best chance to make the roster, I feel like there were some other directions the Broncos could have gone in rather than Tyree Cleveland, because it's tough to see him on the 53 unless he really comes in and just and balls out and surprises everybody when he gets here, because I don't know that he's going to be able to beat out Juwan Winfrey and Tim Patrick and Deshaun Hamilton for one of those roster spots. And you figure, based on what Vic Fangio said about Deontay Spencer, you figure Spencer's going to be on the 53 as well, even with KJ Hamler coming in. So I would have liked a developmental tackle like Alex Taylor here better than Tyree Cleveland.
Well, and guys, you throw into the equation that the Broncos signed 2 undrafted wide receivers already. I mean, Ryan, when they took Tyree Cleveland, I was thinking kind of what you were talking about was, okay, maybe this is their UDFA wide receiver that they just wanted to make sure it didn't get out of their grasp. Nope. They go out and go and get 2 other wide receivers. It's like they're trying to get every single wide receiver available and just hoping that they find one diamond in the rough outside of course, Hamler and Judy.
Yeah, and to me, the real value right there was at running back. You know, you had Salvin Ahmed, you had JJ Taylor, a couple speed guys who I think could come in, try to convince the coaching staff that they could be more valuable than what Royce Freeman can bring. And well, I'm sure they're still going to try to bring in running backs. I think I saw that they already picked one up. I think some higher quality competition for that number 3 running back spot would have been more valuable than that competition for the 6th or like maybe the 4th through 7th receiver spots. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and Zach, who are the names of the 2 wide receivers that have already signed? Do you have those?
We have Kendall Hinton from Wake Forest, or as Mace would say, Wake, of course. And we also have Zamari Manning from, of course, Tarleton State.
Coach
Tarleton State.
Of course. Coach Zazani will love him.
Oh, man. Okay. So quickly, Andre, your grade of the Tyree Cleveland pick.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this. I almost gave it a D. At the end, though, it's 2 picks away from Mr. Relevant. I was generous and gave it a C. I get the gambling on the measurables. And who knows, maybe since Deontay Spencer seems to be guaranteed a roster spot, this is the kind of guy who can try and compete with that 4.4 speed, with that explosiveness to jump almost 40 inches and factor into the return game or somehow special teams as well, because you're going to have to find a way to get him on the field and try to get value out of this low 7th round pick.
All right, and that leads us to our very last pick of the day at 254 picks into the draft. The Broncos selected Derrek Tuszka out of North Dakota State. Henry, I know you really like this guy.
Oh, I love him. Incredibly productive. He's beating everybody. And for those of you who don't watch FCS football, you've probably heard that NDSU has won, probably 6 of the last 7 national championships at this point. I haven't checked the numbers recently.
He's a baseball player.
But the reason why isn't that they have like Carson Wentz and all those guys coming through. It's because they build from the trenches. They have so many great linemen, both offensively, defensively, that they just dominate inside. And obviously Tuszka is one of those guys, just so explosive. I think he fits as an outside linebacker in the Broncos scheme. I haven't seen him in coverage all that much, but we know what he can do when he's trying to get the quarterback. And I really like him, as a tool for Bill Collar in particular, another FCS guy. He was a Hall of Fame football player at Montana State. I think that this could be a great fit. Let him learn behind Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. He's a very good football player and a great value where the Broncos got him.
The $64,000 question on Tuszka is whether he can operate standing up, because the vast majority of almost exclusively with him on his film in North Dakota is with his hand in the dirt, or at North Dakota, his hand in the rubber granules on the field turf that they have up there in the Fargo Dome. So that's the big question I have. The pass rush instincts are there, the moves are there. I'm flashing back to one play he made down in Shrine Bowl practice where he was able to get the left tackle off balance and leaning too far, and he just did a little shove on the inside shoulder, and he was at the quarterback in about 2 seconds, and there was no chance of anything but a sack right there. So he's really quick to capitalize when the offensive lineman makes a mistake, and he also may be the most interesting man in the Broncos draft class. He flies his own plane.
Whoa. Probably put it in a contract that he can't do that anymore. If he couldn't play football, he would want to fly around Alaska. They've got, of course, small plane services that handle a lot of business there in that state. And he measured
in crop and weed science at North Dakota State. The weed science might come in handy in Denver, although I don't think it's that kind of weed.
I was going to say.
Mace, I thought the $64,000 question with him was, how in the world are we going to remember how to pronounce his name? But don't worry, I got the solution. Tuszka Lusa. There we go.
It's the easiest possible pronunciation when you look at that name.
It's like an elephant.
There's nothing easy about
it's
that.
It's a silent Z.
What did you think it was? Looking at that name at first, what was your first instinct, Zach?
Yeah, lay it on.
How that name is pronounced.
For everyone watching this, if you haven't looked at his name, go look at his name, and I think you'll side with me on that. It is not the most obvious pronunciation when you look at his name.
Should I bring up the pronunciation of Chihuahua?
Chihuahua.
Sorry, Zach.
It's just a silent C, like you will be if you keep having bad takes.
Wow.
Whoa. Should I just let myself go right now?
Okay, so that is the Broncos 2020 class, or at least the day 3 haul that feels like 4 days. Day 3 haul that we just discussed there. And before we exit out of that, Andre, your grade on the Derrek Tuszka pick.
Yeah, I might be a little lower than Amazing Hank here on him. I just have some questions about that size, the lack of length. He's a guy who really relies on his hands and bull rush. If he doesn't have the reach to really get his hands on NFL offensive tackles, I worry about that. And obviously the big questions about him being able to stick as a stand-up edge in Denver, and maybe a lack of room to grow to maybe be moved in as a 5 technique, which ideally is where I would see him fitting best. But then he tested really well at the combine, so he's kind of the opposite of Strnad, where he tested really well at the combine, doesn't completely translate on tape, but has me intrigued. So it's another C grade for me. I had keyed in on another FCS edge rusher, Bryce Stirk from Montana State, who I had ranked higher here, who I believe was still available. But still, I'm intrigued by the pick, intrigued by the depth. Maybe this means that Justin Hollins gets more reps on the inside. It'll be interesting with that rotation at edge now with Itachu, Malik Reed, Justin Hollins, how they make them all work with Tuszka now in the mix as well.
Dre, I think you got to give him a higher grade than a C. He was just floating in that picture.
Yeah, well, from the right angle, I could get you a photo of even you floating, Big Z. So.
I need that new profile picture.
Okay, let's talk about this entire class. To me, these late days, you start to forget what's going on here and what the draft is all about. And to me, it's about that first round pick. And I tweeted it out today. I'm like, no one has talked about Jerry Jeudy enough today. Like, we're only 2 days removed from the Broncos adding the best receiver in the best receiver class in years. So let's just not, go a whole day without talking about Jerry Jeudy. But that's where the class started. Then, of course, it went on to KJ Hamler, Michael Ojemudia, Lloyd Cushenberry, McLovin Agim, Albert Okwuegbunam, Justin Strnad, Netane Muti, Tyree Cleveland, and Derrek Tuszka. I think I was 100% on pronunciations there.
Wow. Yeah, look at Ryan just flexing on me right there.
And that's a 10-man class. It would be surprising to me if all 10 ended up making the team. But in the end, you got 10 players. You improved a lot of positions. So, Henry, I'll start with you. What is your grade of the entire class?
That's a good question. I think when you look at all the national grades that the Broncos get, I have a feeling they're going to be one of the highest graded teams in this draft, and I feel like they should be. I think that if you had to pick 5 winners from this draft, the Broncos are one of those 5 winners. But they didn't address tackle. And it isn't the end of the world. I think that once you slipped past the 3rd round and you couldn't find anybody who would have started this year in place of Garrett Bowles, I think that it's the right call to not draft a tackle unless there is somebody there who you think you can develop into a starter in the future. And in that case, that would have been the move. But because they didn't address that need, and I think that maybe was the second most glaring need on this team coming into the draft, I can't give them better than an A-.
That's fair, Zach.
Boy, I like that A-B+ range. Not sure exactly where to land. Love the first round pick. Absolutely A+. Love the player in KJ Hamler, but just going back to back, he has to turn out to be an absolute star, especially since you could have addressed that position with a starter later in the draft. And then some other guys, Michael Ojemudia. Did I get that?
Mm-hmm. Good job.
I feel like you could have got a similar player again later in the draft. I like his traits, though, that he has, so a little bit lower on that. But at the end of the day, you walked away with 3 starters, throwing Lloyd Cushenberry in that mix as well. I'm going to go an A- as well, because in the end, that's the most important thing, is coming away with 3 starters, and you have some potential in other guys. But in order for it to be an A, I just would have liked to see a couple of those day 2 picks really pan out a little better. And I mean, just like Hank said, addressing tackles a really good point, and they did not do that.
Mace?
Yeah. Are you saying, Zach, that the KJ Hamler is a starter as a third receiver?
Yes.
Okay.
He better be.
I would even go as far as say that Ojemudia, if he is what you hope he can be, stepping in and contributing in the sub package, that he could effectively be a starter as well, or play more than 50% of the reps. So you could be looking at 4 year 1 starters out of this group, and they should all be productive. I'm going to give it an A- just because I feel like they could have gone in a better direction with the Tyree Cleveland pick there at the end. But in general, there's not a lot of quibble. I thought the risk reward ratio on Muti was perfect there in round 6. I like Strnad and what he can bring skill set wise there late in round 5. And I don't want to really give the Broncos a downgrade for not getting a tackle, because it's incomplete. What if they turn around this week and Pat Shurmur calls up his old buddy Jason Peters?
Yeah.
And
well, I'm personally going off what we know now.
Right. If that's the case, then I feel phenomenal about it. Yeah, right now, am I nervous about Elijah Wilkinson or Garrett Bowles at left tackle? Yeah, and certainly there is nothing positive for Garrett Bowles that can be gleaned from John Elway saying, yeah, you've been the starter for 3 years, but now you're in an open competition with somebody who hasn't played left tackle at this level. And oh, by the way, you still haven't got the 5th-year option yet. And if he's in competition with Elijah Wilkinson, I don't see why you're going to give him the 5th-year option. It's not trending in the right direction for Garrett Bowles. They don't seem to have a lot of confidence there. I'll feel better if it's Peters, and I'm a little disappointed they didn't take advantage of the depth at tackle in this draft, but they were able to take care of a lot of other issues on this team, and it's still at the point in its development to where the shopping list is going to exceed the number of items that you can actually take care of in the draft. So A-.
For me, I look at these pick by pick. I absolutely love the KJ Hamler pick. I love the Lloyd Cushenberry pick. I love the Albert Okwuegbunam pick. And then I look at some of the other guys and I say, okay, well, those are just wait and see. And you're going to have a lot of wait and see picks here. But I joked about this in the DNVR lounge. I said, you know what? If you were sitting there at 15 and you traded 9 picks to move up to 14 and take Jerry Jeudy, I would have given the class an A. So I'm giving the class an A. Obviously, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but to me, it is an A class, and it really does begin with Jerry Jeudy. Like that to me is one of the best picks in the entire draft. I already said it. I think he has the potential to be the best Broncos wide receiver of all time. I think this guy is a transcendent talent. I've been saying it for months now that I think he, is the type of player that can completely alter and change you as an offense. So that's where it starts with me. The rest is just, a cherry on top. And so for me, that's why I go with the A. it really does begin with Jerry Jeudy and getting him there at 15.
Yeah, looking back at all this, I had to do the grades for the entire NFL to really gauge where everyone stands and have an accurate view of where the Broncos stack up with the rest of the league. Well, they're tied with the Cincinnati Bengals and Minnesota Vikings as the only 3 teams per my big board to have come away with 6 guys ranked in my top 100 to receive a 3rd round grade or higher. So 6 guys who I'm projecting within their rookie contracts to at some point be able to be a reliable, at least average starter in the NFL, which I think is high praise. You add to that they get their dream scenario in Jerry Jeudy at 15, a guy who, I've been drooling over for a couple of years, watching some of his tape in the last couple of days. I've been taken back to watching him as a sophomore and just loving his game and remembering, how I saw him as a top 5 prospect. And he's one of those guys where you think so highly of him, you almost don't allow yourself to dream of him playing for your team or the team that you cover, because it just doesn't seem possible or even realistic. So to get that on top of 5 others who I see legitimate starter potential in this league, the fact that they were able to completely revamp the offense, give the offense a completely different identity, the fact that they were able to mix and match safer picks like Michael Oge and Lloyd Cushenberry with more high upside selections in Agim and Albert O and even Muti and Cleveland. I think it's just the perfect mix. 10 picks, maybe a little too much. They fell off a bit on day 3, which is to be expected. But I think all in all, this is going to be one of the better draft classes of this entire 2020 NFL draft. I think part of that is that the Broncos killed it by adding offensive talent, which was truly the strength of this class.
Couldn't agree more. I think you nailed it there. And real quick, because I don't want to forget about this. Oh, here we go. Here's an awesome tweet from our friend Romy Bean, who shows she's got us up on the TV.
Nice.
Hopefully not a Photoshop like the Vic Fangio one we had yesterday, a real TV there. But one quick thing, I was talking about this with Andre today that I want to make sure that we touch on, and he said, make sure you bring that up on the show. So I'm making sure I do. I think KJ Hamler can get faster if he tightens up his running mechanics. When you watch him run, he's a little bit wide with his arms and a little bit wide with his legs, and he's very shifty, and it almost makes him extra elusive. It's weird. It's just the way that he runs is a little bit weird, and I just wonder if when he was preparing for the draft and when he was preparing to run his 40, if he didn't get a little bit of advice on how to improve that 40 time by tightening up the mechanics. But just when you watch him on the field, he's just a little bit wide in his strides. I wonder if he can actually get a little bit faster, if you can believe it.
Yeah, well, and you see it in particular when he's breaking on routes. Like, it's almost like he just kind of starts flailing occasionally. Like, he's just a little bit out of control. He can't keep up with his own speed. And kind of talking about that wideness that he runs with, Jerry Jeudy, part of the reason he's so explosive is that he's pigeon-toed. Yep. Like having your feet just angled in a little bit so that he can push off and jump inside. These strange running forms, they can provide a little bit of a boost, I think.
You look at our scouting report, it's that he can be rerouted too easily at the second level. And I think that's part of, getting into his breaks and not always being the smoothest. Rewatching a lot of his tape last night for that film room that you'll find up on DNVR.com. I have no question that this is a 4.2, 4.3. I don't even care, but he is definitely that kind of speedster. You better have safety help over the top or you are done with KJ Hamler.
Yeah, and I said it on Twitter, but I knew I was going to love your film room. I knew it was going to make me like KJ Hamler more, and it completely did. As I said, it's not just about the speed, it's about the quickness, and the quickness allows him to use his speed. That slot fade that you had in the film room that he ran there was a perfect example. Use his quickness at the line to get the release, to make a little break off, and then you see him, use the speed once he has you where he wants you to take off. It's right up there somewhere. But yeah, so there's the film room from Andre. Highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's pretty special, man. And looking at my board, they got 3 guys in the top 60. That's what we were talking about with the trade up, right? Oh, could they move back up? Maybe get another guy like Cushenberry. They kind of still managed to do that while waiting it out and adding other valuable pieces. I think they really kind of managed the board pretty nicely.
All right, well, we talked a little bit about John Elway and how he might be trying to avoid Drew Lock not having weapons early in his career, like John Elway didn't have weapons early in his career. And John was actually asked about that after the draft, so let's hear what he had to say.
Yeah, this is for John. John, I know when Peyton was here, you made a point to try to surround him with some of the things that really helped you late in your career. I was just curious, as you're trying to surround Drew with a lot of the things he needs early in his career, how much does your own experience at that position and what you had or wish you had kind of influence some of the decisions?
Well, I mean, I think that as a quarterback, it's there's no question you always want to have great weapons around you. But I think, the key thing is trying to figure out how to win football games. And I think that when you look back over the last 4 years since Super Bowl 50, when we really – we won it on the defensive side, and then with Peyton retired, we've been trying to find that replacement for Peyton since then. And so, we've tried to concentrate on the defensive side with the idea that if we can keep the score down, we'll stay in football games, and eventually try to find the quarterback that we can replace him with, and eventually, get the offense back on track. And so I think that. With the way Drew played at the end of last year, that we saw the signs of a guy that has a chance to be very successful in this league. But to do that, he's got to have some good people around him. And so the concentration, and we felt like we're still in good shape defensively, especially with, again, like I said, what we've added in the offseason is through trades we needed to add that explosive feature on the offensive side. And we had the guy that we believe over time, as I've talked about, that it's going to take it some time, but you give him a chance to be successful, and us a chance to be successful, and we got to put points on the board, and 17 points a game is not nearly enough. And so the first step was this year in the draft.
Great points, and the big thing there was 17 points is not nearly enough, and we've talked about it at length. And Vic Fangio said it. Only 2 teams have beat the Chiefs in the last 2 years, scoring less than 30 points. So you almost have to double your offensive output. They've definitely doubled their weapons on the offensive side of the ball. But I want to ask you guys, and we're kind of addressing the elephant in the room here. Everyone's talking about this being the Drew Lock draft and investing in Drew, and it's no excuses for Drew Lock now. This type of narrative is being thrown around, but there's a whole other side of the world saying you're leaving Drew Lock out to dry by not addressing the tackle position. So I know we touched on it a little bit as we were going through grades of the class, but how do you feel, Andre, about them passing on tackle entirely in this class? And do you feel like Drew Lock can succeed with Garrett Bowles on the left side?
That's undoubtedly disappointing. Most of all, because I really saw this as the most talented tackle class I'd ever studied, both for top high-end talent and the general depth. I think I had 13 guys projected, as draftable players at the position, which is pretty rare, and 9 of those as future starters. So it's disappointing that they didn't address it, but clearly they didn't see their guys, and the guys who kept sliding, the Prince Tega Wanagus, the Sadiq Charles, the Ben Barchas, they didn't have tackle length. So clearly they didn't fit what the Broncos are looking for at tackle. So their list was smaller than the one I'm working with. And no, to answer your question, I don't think this offense and Drew Lock can fully succeed with that below average level play at left tackle. But that doesn't mean you need to spend a high pick or spend another big contract. Sometimes, especially with a guy like Mike Munchak, you can develop or find an underdeveloped gem and bring them along, and maybe that's how you fix it. But yeah, I mean, that's the final kind of missing piece on this roster, at least offensively on paper.
I think it's worth remembering what it would look like if the Broncos had drafted a tackle. I think it's easy to say, well, you know what? You get a first-round tackle. That's your day one starter. He's taking the job from Garrett Bowles, and then you're off and running. And, there's a chance that happens. I think that he would definitely be starting. But it's important to remember, I think, that any rookie is going to make mistakes, and tackle is one of the toughest positions to adapt to quickly in the NFL. And I don't mean this as a joke, but it's almost a positive that when Garrett Bowles gets beat, he's just going to grab the guy. Drew Lock isn't going to take any hits. And as great as it'd be to just cut down on any bad plays from your left tackle, at least you're keeping Drew Lock upright because Garrett Bowles is just going to get called for a hold. Whereas some of these young guys, they might not get beat as often, but when they get beat, there's a good chance that Drew Lock is just getting laid out from behind.
I see it the complete opposite of that, actually, Henry. I see it as Drew Lock can run around. He's athletic. So if Garrett Bowles gets beat, yes, Drew Lock will occasionally get hit. He's going to get hit no matter who his tackles are. Even if you have the great ones, he's occasionally going to get hit. But I see it as how debilitating and deflating are those penalties on 3rd and 7. You get a first down, and then it's coming back and you're at 3rd and 17. And how many of Garrett Bowles' holding penalties have we seen? I mean, even great quarterbacks can't overcome stuff like that. No, I think Drew will be able to overcome those more than Joe Flacco and more than Case Keenum were able to. But that's something that we've seen firsthand isn't going to be able to get coached out of him. So what I'm disappointed about with this draft is what Andre talked about. This was such a deep tackle class. I did not expect the Broncos to have a new starting tackle coming out of this class. I didn't, because then you'd have to get him in the first round, maybe in the second round. And if you're going 3rd round or later, I was not expecting that guy to be the starter. But how do you come away from this draft with 10 picks and not a single one of them, let alone one in the 3rd round, is a tackle? And especially because Dre mentioned it and John Elway also mentioned it when we talked to him just 5 days ago about that this is a good tackle class. It's deep. It's one of the strongest positions. It's something that you had a need of. And they just did not address it at all. So that's why I don't like it. Not necessarily because they didn't get Garrett Bowles' day one replacement.
Well, the other thing is you take a look at Garrett Bowles last year. Okay, Drew Lock was able to make him look better. But at the same time, do you want Drew Lock escaping and putting himself at risk of taking a hit or falling awkwardly? Because he did miss a couple of months because he got outside the pocket in the preseason and he kind of landed wrong on his thumb. And the other thing with Garrett Bowles, just because he can reach out and grab doesn't mean he always does that. Remember back in the Browns game, he nearly got Brandon Allen decapitated on the touchdown pass to Noah Fant.
Yep.
So that plus the fact that tactically you have to scheme around Garrett Bowles, it's something that we've heard from coaches around the league, that there are things you can't do offensively because you're trying to compensate for Garrett Bowles. It was a position I thought that they needed to upgrade. Now, that being said, they've still got some cap space, and if I could take a time machine to a week from now and find out that Jason Peters was a Denver Bronco, right, then I'd feel great. The only negative would be, okay, you had a good tackle class this year, and next year's tackle class, who knows how it's going to look, right, based on what we see in terms of how the college football season ends up shaking out. Now, I'll throw another thing at you. Let's say there's an indication that there may be an altered college football season that causes some guys to declare for the supplemental draft. Maybe you're talking about a left tackle coming aboard as a supplemental pick, and the Broncos go ahead and use their an early draft pick for next year in a supplemental draft that could be more robust than any other in NFL history here coming up in the next couple of months.
That would be crazy. That would be the ultimate win now move.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think we're all on board with the idea of going and getting Jason Peters. And that would, I think, all of Broncos country would just be over the moon if they were able to go do that. But I will say this, and this certainly played a part in the Broncos not going tackle in this class, and it's just they felt like they kind of found a formula at the end of the year for getting Garrett Bowles a little bit more on the same page with the rest of the offense. And so I think there's a little bit of hope there in terms of Mike Munchak, some outside methods that he's been using, the combination of having a quarterback in there who actually can sense what's going on in the pocket. And so I guess my most pressing point here is I get why everyone wanted tackle, and I think, if they would have gone tackle in the second round instead of KJ Hamler, and it was one of the ones that we liked, well, we'd probably be feeling really good right now.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I hate is the people saying, well, good luck with all those offense. When you have no offensive line, Drew's just going to get sacked every play. And it's like, well, then you just didn't watch the end of the season last year when he got sacked and, an average of one time per game. So yes, the Bulls holding penalties are rough, and you definitely have to figure out a solution at that position long-term eventually. But let's not, hyperbolize everything by saying, oh, since you didn't replace tackle, Jerry Jeudy's useless, Hamler's useless, Albert Okwuegbunam, like all these guys are useless. It's just since you didn't fortify the offensive line, the offense is doomed. I don't think that is even close to the truth. And I think that in the end, Drew Lock is going to have a better offensive line, I'll touch wood, in front of him starting week 1 next year than he did any of those 5 games. And I think there's a pretty significant gap between those two offensive lines, and he was still able to avoid sacks. So let's just be realistic in these conversations and talk about, football and not hyperbolize everything.
So let's be positive then. When was the last time the Broncos had a better interior offensive line trio than they do projecting Cushenberry flanked by Dalton Rosner and Graham Glasgow? I think you have to go back to at least 2015 when you had kind of Evan Mathis toward the end of his career on one side, Lou Vasquez, who was gamely playing through back issues, but still was a good guard. And then, of course, Matt Paradis, who was terrific right out of the blocks in his first year as a starting center. So Super Bowl 50 is the last time you felt this good about your interior trio.
And that interior trio is really going to help the running game, something I don't feel like I talked about enough yesterday. And that, of course, will keep defenses more on their toes, opening up space for the running game and defenses to not pin their ears back. Also, the whole Hamler-Jeudy versus an offensive tackle discussion, what gets lost in that is those guys are so quick at getting open right off the bat on those releases that they're actually going to allow Drew Lock to get the ball out quicker and be thus less susceptible to oncoming pressure that way if he can get the timing of the offense down. So I do think that things have been done to help Drew Lock with how he handles pressure, even if the offensive tackle wasn't addressed.
That's a great point. And I think another thing that helps Drew Lock with those guys getting such quick releases is that he is still a young quarterback, still growing into the role. You can give him a lot of first read stuff and have the chance for some big plays because those guys are going to fire so quick off the snap.
Yep.
I love seeing that we have some people who don't listen to the podcast in the comment section here. I know that we have some new listeners because they don't understand touch wood. Because I used to say knock on wood, and then we had some listeners out there in the UK who say touch wood instead of knock on wood. And somehow, some way, it just evolved to now we only say touch wood. And we even have, it's not reachable right now, but we even have a little wooden thing on it that says BSN Broncos podcast, touch wood. So we altered it. Now it's our own little tradition. Anyways, we have some more audio here from John Elway and Vic Fangio. This one about Drew Lock and the idea of getting him started on the offense during these odd times, and now that they can have more contact with the coaches, how they're going to approach that.
What is the plan to teach and learn this system now that Pat and Drew can talk? And if John can put any insight into that too about how it works.
Well, they're gonna start on Monday, and I'm sure there'll be some trial and error here with the total communication, because now you're communicating with a bunch of different players at one time from all different locations. So we're going to see how it goes, but we're going to be aggressive to push the limits of this teaching situation because it's critical, especially for our offense and our quarterback, as you mentioned, with Drew putting in a new offense. So we're going to make the most of it. I'm sure some of it's going to be trial and error, and we'll make adjustments as we go through these next 3 weeks. But I'm confident we'll get a lot out of it.
Interesting stuff, and that's like one thing that has to give you pause if you're thinking about this. You know, you got all these great new weapons, all this fun stuff, a new offense, a new offensive coordinator. All that sounds really exciting. It's just you just have to hope that all these guys can really bear down and use this time on their own to learn this stuff. And I think, you know, more than ever, it's probably important that John Elway went and got these guys who are captain types, because those are the guys who are going to say, you know what, I got to be ready. The second that they say, hey, it's time to come back to Denver, I don't want to be even a half step behind anyone. So I got to use as much time as I possibly can. You know, it goes back to Drew Lock drawing up plays on the mirror and calling plays into himself. Like, those are the type of guys you need. You really, really need that right now.
Well, it's what we talked about just a couple of weeks ago about how, unfortunately, being remote and not being in the facility for this offseason is going to impact and be a negative to Drew more than other quarterbacks. The veteran quarterbacks that have the same system, this doesn't matter to them. You know, Tom Brady hadn't gone to OTAs for many years, and he was still fine out in New England. Drew Lock's in a completely different situation. Not only is he young, not only are we finding out he's getting all of these new weapons that he needs to build some chemistry with both on and off the field, but now he can't be with Pat Shurmur and it's all virtual. That's the biggest concern right now to me with the Broncos offense. And it's clear to Vic that may be his biggest concern about the offense as well. I mean, he didn't hold back and downplay it at all. He really said how it was a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting dynamic with this new offense. I think a lot of onus is going to be put on Shurmur of having to simplify the offense at first. You know, he's a veteran OC, and I think the criticism for the Kubiaks and the Shanahans is the offense is more complex. It takes a little more experience to get into. I'm relying on a guy like Shurmur with a young quarterback, something he's had to deal with throughout his career. First-time starters, young quarterbacks, the success he's had with Case Keenum, Sam Bradford, you know, guys who are thrust into the lineup mid-season or early into the year and weren't getting those first-team reps. He's going to have to pull from that experience, simplify things, and get this young group as ready as possible early on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you're right, you know, it's okay to put extra pressure on these coordinators. Mm-hmm. It's much better than putting extra pressure on all of these young football players. Pat Shurmur, make it nice and simple for them, build it up, and then once you get to training camp, you know, you can increase the speed of the install then if that's something you want to do. But I think it's a smart idea to not have these guys start drinking from a fire hose when they're just at home on their own trying to figure this whole thing out. I think you could really overwhelm them, and you don't have them in front of you every day to say, hey, let's get in here, you know, and explain these things to them. I think you really want to try and bring them along slow in this process.
Drinking from a fire hose, throwback to John Elway talking about Vance Joseph.
Vance Joseph got some fun pieces to work with on that defense during this draft. And speaking of some of the other teams' drafts, why don't we take a look around the AFC West right now and just kind of go through who we think maybe might be some of the better drafts, who won, who lost, how did everyone do here in the AFC West? Andre, these are your grades.
Yeah, I thought the Chiefs, all in all, were able to come out with some pretty nice value. You know, 3 guys in my top 100 with Willie Gay, Lucas Niang, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Interesting that they addressed tackle. I think that was a low-key need that maybe most mocks didn't have. So I think considering where they were drafting, they came away with a nice haul. Chargers, Raiders, multiple first-round picks. I think they came away with about appropriate value with where they were slotted to pick, but didn't exceed that value. You know, every team in the NFL is getting better. You're not going to get any parades from me for that. You're going to get a nice little C, and we're going to see from there. So that's where those 2 teams are.
Yeah, any thoughts, Mace, on the rest of the AFC West and how they did?
I thought there was some good value for the Chargers. I mean, I love the fact that they got KJ Hill there at the end of the draft. That's, I mean, they can plug him in as a slot receiver, and I think they're going to have one of the best value picks there in round 7. The Raiders, the best part to me, I thought, was the third round when they got Lynn Bowden and Brian Edwards back to back there. But let's just take the cornerbacks. Okay, they take Damon Arnett in round 1. And the value there, frankly, it's questionable at best. There's a good chance that Amik Robertson, who they pick in the 4th round, is actually going to be more productive for them than Damon Arnett's going to be. It's not a bad draft for the Raiders. It's just when you see things like that, it's curious, and it sort of smacks of kind of the Cleveland Farrell pick last year at number 4 overall. I think sometimes Mike Mayock has a tendency to get a little bit too cute in some of the decision making.
2 things for me. 1, it all comes down to Justin Herbert for the Chargers. If he ends up being the guy, fantastic draft. They got their quarterback of the future, the franchise guy with the 6th overall pick. What a steal. A draft, doesn't matter what the rest happens there. Obviously, I don't know if any of us truly believe that will happen. So, Dre, I agree with your grade there. But it all comes down to him. And with the Raiders, is it time to finally say that Derek Carr is John Gruden's guy? He's had 2 drafts now where he's had plenty of capital to either move up or just select a quarterback in the 1st round. And he's passed on it both times. He passed on some big name free agents this offseason. Or, I mean, maybe there's a chance on Monday they go out and sign Jameis or something.
That would be hilarious because they already have Mariota in that in that room when they get back there. But that's actually, I mean, that's actually another discussion for another day. Is Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, and Cam Newton. And oh, by the way, not in the division, but on the Broncos schedule, the Patriots kind of kicking the quarterback can down the road. What do they do next? There are a lot of fascinating aspects when we start discussing quarterback down the line. But yeah, the thing with John Gruden also that's interesting, guys, is that he doesn't really have a lot of trust in young quarterbacks. And you look over the course of his head coaching career, a lot of the success he had is Rich Gannon, Reclamation Project. In Tampa Bay, won a division title with Jeff Garcia when he was on the scrap heap. And the fascinating thing that year from a Broncos perspective, he wanted Jake Plummer as well, but Jake said, no, I don't really want to go down to Tampa Bay. I'm just going to retire. But John Gruden kind of has this fetish, not for young quarterbacks in the draft, or not even for those he inherits, but for reclamation projects. So maybe Marcus Mariota becomes his new boo.
Wow. I mean,
or Bay or whatever.
I think he kind of is. Yeah.
It really wouldn't surprise me. All right. We got some more audio here from John Elway and Vic Fangio talking about the motivation for why they went after so much speed in this draft. Let's hear from John and Vic on that.
That they've only lost twice when opponent failed to score 30 points. You brought that up at the end of last year. How much was that motivating when you added these offensive weapons through this draft in this offseason?
Well, I mean, we needed to score more points, whether we're playing the Chiefs or not. But obviously, playing against them, you're going to need to. So, that was part of it. And adding the speed is always good to be fast, but sometimes people make the mistake of just getting fast with players that aren't good football players. We believe our speed that we've drafted has come with players that can play the game also. So it was good to get the added speed. Hopefully we're a harder offense to defend now once it evolves and we get to playing games. But yeah, I mean, we need to score more points.
John, on the same part of that, was it a point when you committed to Drew that we're like, we're going to find as many weapons as we can for him then?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely part of it, especially with the number of picks that we had and, where we ended last year as far as, and the things that we'd added in free agents or in trades in the offseason and free agency. we felt like, we had something to build around. And, with the way that Drew played the end of last year, that we wanted to also, give him a chance to be, successful and take advantage of what his abilities were. And also, as Vic said, we got to put points on the board. And it's been very frustrating for all of us the last 3-4 years because we have not been explosive on the offensive side. And even really 5 years, Super Bowl, when we won Super Bowl 50, we weren't very explosive on the offensive side either. We were just very, very good on the defensive side. So, I think that, we want a well-balanced football team. We want to play great defense, but also we got to be able to score points. And, we're able to, with our plan, do it this year. And the way things fell, we were able to do that through, with Jerry in the first round, KJ in the second, and even Alberto, in the fourth round to be able to add speed to the offense.
Don't you think if you're Rich Scangarello and TC McCartney, you're thinking like, well, if Drew needed all of that to succeed, how come we didn't get the benefit of the doubt of needing all that to succeed?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where's the love?
Yeah, I think in the end, the Broncos just kind of identified Shermer and said, if he's available, we want him. We think he's a great fit with Drew Lock. And so, unfortunately, I think, Skangs was just kind of a victim of that as they kind of fell in love with someone while they were still in a relationship with him. And it was just a matter of time until they got out of their current relationship before they could, start dating.
Yeah, and the funny thing is also with Skangs, he likes the fullback, but he also likes 2 tight end sets. So you wonder what he could have pulled off with Alberto and Noah Fant working together as well. I mean, I think there were some interesting possibilities if they kept him around, and maybe that's a good what if to tackle here in the next few weeks. What would the Broncos offseason look like if Scangarello was still the OC?
So
well,
true.
and to me, one of the interesting things John Elway said was, we think we found a guy to build around, talking about Drew. So we needed to put weapons around him. And that made me think, so because you didn't fully believe in Joe Flacco, or you fully didn't believe in Case Keenum, you just weren't going to give them weapons and give them tools to succeed? Well, of course they're going to fail. Now, maybe, it wasn't that deep of a comment from John, but man, that's what I thought about.
Well, if you think about it, though, they did try to add. They did add Dalton Reisner to help out Joe Flacco. They did add Noah Fant to try to help out Joe Flacco. So they took the first step last year, maybe not quite as much, but they did try to do some things to help Joe Flacco. They just weren't quite as close as they now are with Drew.
Yep, exactly. I mean, they had to build that base to start with. It's interesting, going back to John's very first quote that we played, talking about how his experience has dictated things. And he talked about, well, we really focused on the defense first, and now we're more focused on offense because you need to score points with the Chiefs and what have you. Start of his career as a GM, the first pick of his first 5 drafts were all defensive players. Now in the last 5 drafts, the most recent ones, 4 of the last 5 have been offensive players. The only one who wasn't is Bradley Chubb. And even then, Cortland Sutton was selected in the second round. Last year, you had 2 selections in the second round, both on offense. And this year you had, Hamler and Cushenberry on day 2 on top of Michael Oge and Agim. So they're just loading up on offense, and it's finally starting to look pretty promising.
It does look promising. And speaking of loading up on offense, they have started their quest to sign some undrafted free agents here. We have a few of these names up here on the graphic, so let's throw that up now, see what we're working with. Zamari Manning, like Andre said, not to be confused with Coach Zazani. Wide receiver Kendall Hinton out of Wake Forest. Quarterback Riley Neal out of Vanderbilt, and running back Levante Bellamy out of Western Michigan. Of course, the one that probably perks people's eyes up is the quarterback out of Vanderbilt, a guy who probably will compete with Brett Rippon to stay around, long term.
Yeah, there's also a name not on this list. Keep your eye on him. Offensive tackle Hunter Watts out of Central Arkansas, a school that we've all heard about in the last week because it's the alma mater of the great Scottie Pippen. But there's your developmental tackle, perhaps, Hunter Watts from UCLA.
They got a tackle. They got a tackle. And guys, if you want a little comedy on this Saturday night, find the tweet I retweeted. It's on my Twitter. It is It is put out by his alma mater that he
Sending it
signed
in
with
right
the Broncos,
now.
or that he agreed to terms with the Broncos, and this is a hilarious rendering. We'll pull it up on the screen soon. It is
Oh, man.
absolutely
Oh.
hilarious.
These
6,
poor
8.
small school graphic staffs.
They tried.
Someone who doesn't know what they're doing was tasked with doing that, and it's just not fair to them.
I think the nicest
It looks
touch
like this would be on SNL.
I think the nicest touch is they've still got him in the gray pants that they wear at UCA.
Well, we're getting close to having that up on the screen so you guys can enjoy it like us.
He's 6'8", 307, which is interesting. A bit Alejandro Villanueva size.
Well, there you go. And we talked about Alex Taylor a lot, and he has some similar dimensions. Taylor signed with the Cleveland Browns as an undrafted free agent, so perhaps they're looking at Hunter Watts with the same kind of plan, working with Mike Munchak. It's there's words for me on this. Oh, by the way, if you look at how they photoshopped the NFL shield there at the base of the collar like that.
It looks like Dad in sweats just put on his Broncos jersey.
I'm curious to see what this guy
So
actually
bad.
looks like.
I was gonna say Grandpa, so you were nice with Dad.
It somehow accentuates his gut and makes him look like he is just so not well compact.
He kind of looks like Garrett Bowles.
Yeah, Garrett Bowles' dad, maybe. Levante Bellamy is the guy who stands out the most to me. I had to double check there because Bellamy is a guy that I used to have on my college fantasy football team. I've scouted Western Michigan from when they were at PJ Fleck coached them, and they have two very promising NFL offensive tackles. So I'd almost forgot that he was still in college. He's a small back, very productive at Central Michigan. Again, Western Michigan Broncos in that PJ Fleck system, that wide open offense. His best season as a junior, 30 receptions. So that's 5'9", 190. He's got a little shake to him. Very productive, can be a weapon out the backfield. An intriguing third back to put in that competition at least.
And speaking of third backs, I feel like, as you're trying to add speed to this team, the person that you should be looking to is Khalfani Muhammad. He's someone who's hung around for a little bit now. You don't necessarily need Royce Freeman around anymore, although he's cheap and you did still draft him pretty high, so you could keep him around. But if you just wanted to upgrade speed, Khalfani Muhammad would be one to keep around as well.
Yeah, definitely. He's cheap and he's still around. I think that you might have described the mentality with hanging on to Garrett Bowles as the starting left tackle as well.
All right, I've been told we have something involving Henry to play here. I don't know what it is. So, Henry, close your eyes, I guess.
Wait, I have to close my eyes?
No, I don't know. I have no idea what it is. All I know
Brace
is it
yourself
involves
is what
you.
he's saying.
I'm just saying, maybe you don't want to watch.
Oh, no. Okay.
I don't know if we have the audio there.
Okay, so
Well, it was fun while it lasted.
That screen capture of me, boy, I was trying to make a point there. I do not look happy in that at all.
Well, at least you were included.
That?
You caught me mid-pontification.
Yeah, who knows what you were talking about there.
All right. We got another video to cut to here, so let's see what's going on. Apparently, there wasn't supposed to be audio on that one. I'm very confused.
Wow. That is not an official Drake grade, by the way.
He said he'd draft me yesterday.
That's right.
I said I'd draft him first. He said he'd draft me.
Tough.
That's right.
Tough scene. Tough scene.
Yeah, tough scene. Let's see. The on-air talent does not share the views from the graphics department, I think.
Yes, exactly. All right. As we are wrapping up here, we have a couple more things I want to look at. Andre, we had a graphic of you of the best and worst value picks in the first round, and I think it'll be good to kind of work our way back to the first round as we tie a bow on this thing, because that's where most of the action was. So if we have a chance there, Rudo and Ali, if you guys could pull up the graphic of Andre's best and worst value picks from the first round, love to take a look at that. There's some really interesting picks that went on in the first round, and I think this does a good job of illuminating it. So, Andre, who was the best value pick you had in the first round?
Yeah, just barely. It ended up being CeeDee Lamb in front of Jerry Jeudy. Of course, I just had CeeDee one spot ahead of Jeudy on my board, and then Lamb ended up being drafted 3 spots after Jeudy went off the board, or 2 spots after. So he was by 3 points the better value than Jeudy. And then Jeudy, as you see here, tied with Justin Jefferson as the best value pick of round 1. Clearly the wide receivers, with them sliding a bit, you saw a lot of great value. I thought Jeff Gladney at the end of round 1, though, for the Minnesota Vikings, a team where he really fits nicely, was a great value pick as well. And Patrick Queen, somehow the Ravens, even though everyone knew they wanted Patrick Queen, with this, it took the Seahawks drafting Jordan Brooks in front of them, but somehow the Ravens, who are always one of the best drafting teams per my rankings, which keeps me going, frankly, make out as the 5th best value in the first round. Behind them was Tristan Wirfs and Isaiah Simmons, tied at a +4.
And speaking of Jordan Brooks, face on the board, -109. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I talk about those top 100 grades a lot, and amazingly, of the 32 picks in round 1, all had a top 100 grade except for Texas Tech, not Texas State, but he might as well have been Jordan Brooks there. And then you have Damon Arnett, which is part of why the Raiders didn't get much better of a grade from me. -51 value. I can't believe the Raiders, after failing drafting the second cornerback on an Ohio State defense, doing so again only a couple years later. And then AJ Terrell, the corners obviously didn't present much value. Isaiah Wilson also a reach there, and Jordan Love tied with Clyde Edwards-Helaire there at the bottom for a -23 value. Edwards-Helaire will be able to outplay that value with where he landed in KC. But as I was saying, to recap day 1 on yesterday's show, I felt like there were other running back options they could have found in round 2 without pulling the plug in at the 32nd pick overall.
That is brutal for Jordan Brooks.
Hold that thought real quick, Zach. For those listeners who might have a question for us, feel free to send those in on the comments right now. We'll answer a few before we get out of here. Sorry, Zach, I wanted to get those rolling before you talk.
Do you guys know what Jordan Brooks was doing when he got the call from the Seahawks?
Oh, boy.
Was he pulling a Mike Vrabel's son?
No, I don't know what Mike Vrabel's son is. He was cooking pasta. He was making dinner for himself, a cheap pasta dish, because he thought there was no way he was going to get drafted. So, Dre, he would agree with you that he was way overdrafted.
Yeah.
That's first round self-awareness at the very least. You know, a lot of those guys don't always recognize where they're going to land. So, I mean, maybe that means that he is a little bit smarter than we give him credit. I don't know.
He admitted he was surprised. And the interesting thing, though, reading a story from the Seattle Times, is that the Seahawks actually had a trade lined up before making the pick, but it fell through at the last minute, and then they're like, well, Brooks is still there. So it worked out great, unquote, quote unquote, according to John Schneider, their GM. And you're like, okay, you were really worried that Jordan Brooks was not going to be there for you?
Crazy.
You're literally the only team that's probably got him in the top 50. Again, Seattle's board looks nothing like anybody else's in football. And you know, in some ways, it's hard to argue with the results because they've been a consistent winner. But at the same time, you wonder if they would look so good if they didn't have a unicorn like Russell Wilson as their quarterback, able to compensate for other things that are askew on the roster.
All right, let's jump into these questions here. The first one comes from Studer J123. How shocked were y'all when we got Jeudy and Cushenberry at our original spots? I mean, super shocked. I mean, you saw the live stream on Thursday night. We were just every time a pick went down, we were just in awe of the way things were falling. But I think maybe the more shocking one is that you got Cushenberry that late. You know, he was a guy who we kind of had pegged as a second-round pick, maybe even an early second-round pick. And, man, he slips all the way down to the board. And I just, keep thinking about this battery of Cushenberry and Locke, and those two just building a great relationship. I think they're going to be a good fit for each other personality-wise. And, those could be your center and quarterback for a long, long time in Denver.
Yeah, and going off that Cushenberry thing, I think he might be the steal of the draft value-wise. He's certainly in that conversation. Actually, last night I had a friend text me who I covered the Montana Grizzlies with last year before she took a job covering LSU. And so she's now actually covering the Saints, but she spent a lot of time with Lloyd Cushenberry. And after the pick, she texted me and said, "You guys are going to love him. He's incredibly smart. He's a hard worker, but he's also fun-loving." I think that this is a special type of player, special type of person to be adding to that locker room too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, great point. Yeah, Judy shocked, Cushenberry almost relieved because they'd passed on him already a couple times on day 2. So to still get him in the 80s was quite the relief and amazing.
All right, this one from Coach Karch17. Why did Prince Tega Winogo fall so far?
He, like Bryce Hall, probably hurt by injuries. But with Winogu, you had concern about the knee, and I think that contributed to some of his sliding through the draft. I mean, the Broncos, of course, were able to take Muti in round 6 because of concerns about the Liz Frank surgery and also the 2 Achilles injuries that he had. It was something that we kind of expected, in that without the chance for medical cross checks in April, that teams weren't going to roll the dice as high as they might have in some previous years on injured players. But it took its toll on some more than others. I'd say Bryce Hall and Prince Tega Winogu were the biggest losers in terms of not being able to have those medical cross checks here this year.
Yeah, and the other thing with Tega Winogu, he wasn't able to test at the combine, something that Sadiq Charles was able to do despite off-field questions. I think that really saved Charles's draft stock. He went early in the 4th, and then he has shorter arms. And for any projected offensive tackle, that's going to be a concern. Then again, if I was an owner, I would be asking my GM long and hard, why did this high-end starter at left tackle in the SEC just drop and you drafted an average guard in the SEC? Because if your answer is arm length alone, you're fired on the spot.
I got Andre a little fired up.
I like that.
That's why I don't have billions, though, because these are the things that get me fired up, So no fear for any NFL GM that I'll be owning an NFL team anytime soon.
This one from Triad Bronco. What do you think the likelihood of Hamler being around at pick 77 would have been if you took Cleveland at 46?
Slim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he wouldn't have been there.
Yeah, I had him back half of round 2, so maybe going between 50 and 60, but I don't think he was going to be there at 77.
Yeah, and look at the wide receivers that dropped a bit, kind of the taller, bigger wide receivers, while we saw some of the speedier wide receivers even get overdrafted at the end of round 1. I think Hamler, they were almost lucky to have him drop to 46.
Mm-hmm.
What if you took Cleveland there and then you traded up back into the second round, end of the second, early third, to take Hamler, and instead you didn't get Ajim or Okwuegbunam? Would you like that trade?
Yeah, I personally, yes. I would.
What was it again? Say it again.
So you don't have Okwuegbunam or Ajim, but you add Cleveland in there.
Yeah, I'll take that for sure.
Right. So they would have traded up to be able to still get Cleveland and given up those 2 third-rounders that they used on those 2 defensive players. Yeah, and on paper, yes.
The chain reaction also says there you probably don't go tight end in round 4. Maybe you go cornerback. Right. And would they have taken the roll of the dice on Bryce Hall?
Yeah, maybe.
If Okwuegbunam was off the board.
All right, from Kentucky UDFA, what is one player you wanted that you didn't draft, that the Broncos didn't draft?
Jeremy Chin. He's going to be something special. He's a freak athlete. He dropped into the second round because of honestly, I think just because he came from the FCS, but he's going to be a monster.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess in the end, having known that they used wide receiver for their first 2 picks, I wouldn't have minded. If I could swap Visca with Hamler, I would have done that gladly.
Why you gotta steal
Yeah.
my answer?
Yeah.
The truth is, I like it either way. I really do like it either way. But yeah, I mean, selfishly, I would have gone LaVisca. And the pick that I think everyone is hating on that they won't be in a couple of years is Jalen Hurts to the Eagles.
Mm.
What's he going to be?
A weapon.
So Taysom Hill.
Yep, exactly. But better.
I know everyone thinks I'm going to answer this question, Tyler Biadasz or punter. But once the Broncos got Lloyd Cushenberry, I was good. I'd gotten to a point where I said, okay, Cushenberry or Biadasz, I'm happy with either. But there was early in the 4th round, I'm watching how the names are falling. And at 118, I'm thinking Ben Bartsch, the offensive lineman from out of St. John's in Minnesota. I even wrote in my day 3 preview about how the Broncos, historically, if you go back through time, have had some great luck with players who were not Division I players that they picked in the draft. The last non-D1 player that they picked was Chris Cooper back in 2006. And then before that, you have to go back to 1996 when they took John Mobley out of Kutztown. And so I like Ben Bartsch. I sort of wrote that thinking, okay, maybe this is the time they're going to bite on one of those small school gems. But the Jaguars took him 2 picks before the Broncos, and an F-bomb left my lips sitting here in my office. That was the only time in the draft this year I got really upset, was when Bartsch was off 2 picks before the Broncos.
What did you say? Did you say he's from Kutztown?
John Mobley went to Kutztown in Pennsylvania. Kutztown, first round pick back in 96.
Kutztown is what they're going to call Denver when Jerry Jeudy's done with it. Just cutting all over the place.
Well, actually, every NFL town is Kutztown when you get down from 90 to 53.
Boy, that tape at Kutztown to make him a first rounder must just be an all-time. He must have flown on the field, truly levitated above to sack quarterbacks. I mean, God knows what he did.
Oh, the Broncos have a player that levitates now. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, what's his name again?
It's Derrek Tuszka.
There you go.
Oh.
Good job. All right, a couple more here. This one from Lawson for Life. I think we can answer this all in one fall swoop. Who gets more yards next year, Jeudy or Hamler?
Jeudy.
Make it all purpose, but I'd still say Jeudy.
From Terry OT with lots of numbers. Do you think we'll get a free agent corner now? I'm assuming they're talking about someone like Prince Amukamara.
Yep, Logan Ryan, someone like that.
Unless it's like an incredible deal. I don't think the Broncos are going out there and trying to negotiate with these guys and try to get a good value. Vic, after the draft, said that he thinks the Broncos are fine at corner, good depth. And he said, they like what they have in Okwuegbunam, but they have like 5 other depth corners from last year. And I think they're really going to hope that one of those guys develops into a player. And because they have so many guys, I think they're just going to rely on that instead of a veteran.
I like the odds that among Devontae Bosby, Duke Dawson, Devontae Harris, Isaac Yadam, Shaquille Taylor, I like the odds of 2 of those guys being able to help you. My money would be on Devontae Bosby and Duke Dawson out of that group.
Yep, I will agree with you on that one. Though I still would love to see Prince Amukamara. I think that'd be a fun little addition to that cornerback room.
Peters first, though. You get Peters, and if you can still get Mukamara, then you look.
Caleb Vogel, Daily Pod back on Monday, or are you guys taking a couple days off? Well, we've never been ones to take any days off, so that one is not going to change anytime soon.
Maybe 2 pods on Monday, or maybe draft pod on Tuesday, but you'll even get more than the usual 5 dailies. I promise you that much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we've got... Oh, here we go. Are Broncos a wild card spot or a 1-2-3 team today?
I think it's wild card spot 1, 2, or 3.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Our wild card spot 1, 2, or 3.
Oh,
That's
nice.
so weird that there's 3 now.
Yeah. I think the Broncos are in competition firmly for that first wild card spot. You say the Chiefs win the division. You say the Ravens win the division. We'll give the Bills their division, and the Texans. I mean, what
prediction time.
How many other teams in the AFC are you really that scared of? I mean, the Colts maybe.
The Colts are interesting, and I like Jonathan Taylor as somebody who can come in and help them right away. And of course, Philip Rivers, I think he's going to fix a lot of what ailed that team. Actually the biggest wild card, no pun intended, might be the New England Patriots, because I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, but if they come out of this a week from now and Andy Dalton is their quarterback, I know that's not exactly inspiring, but they ask Andy Dalton to not make many mistakes and complement the defense that they've got.
Yeah.
Then New England sneaks through and wins 10 or 11 games, I think, despite everything that's going on there. I'd say the Broncos right now, wild card 2.
Nice.
Wild card 2. I mean, I think they're just firmly in the conversation. You know, all these wild card 1, 2, or 3 is going to come down to like one play at the end of the season. So it's hard for me to determine which one. It'll be interesting just to see if they can actually give the Chiefs a run. Just make the Chiefs sweat a little bit. You know, I think that should be the goal of the season. Obviously, internally, you want to say we're going to go win the division and take it from the Chiefs, but I think you just want to make it interesting. You know, if you can put a little bit of pressure on them, I think that would be a huge win. Obviously, in the end, just make the playoffs however you can. But if you make them sweat a little bit, that means you just absolutely crush it this offseason, and you're on your way to really competing with them. So that should be the goal, in my opinion. And if you end up getting a wild card spot out of it, then I think that's fantastic as well. And I personally believe the Broncos will be right in the thick of things for one of those wild card spots. I think they've done a great job this offseason, and I think Drew Lock is only going to get better.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, Ryan, I agree with you that they'll be in the thick of things for a wild card spot, but competing with the Chiefs is a goal that you do after that. So this is the first goal, and then you compete with the Chiefs down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to keep it interesting as long as you can. You know, make sure that you aren't out of the race. You know, halfway through the season, you want to make them stay on their toes the whole season.
Yeah, I would say the second wild card. I love the additions, but it's a lot of additions on top of the free agents, this whole draft class. And then your biggest free agents from last offseason kind of need to be integrated anew on top of Bradley Chubb getting back in the mix. That's a lot of new pieces to fit into that starting lineup. So I think it might take a little while to get going, but I think the sky's the limit with what they've got on the roster now. I think next year you're looking at a second wild card in the AFC.
Triad Bronco asked what pod to comment on for us to read it on Monday. This one will be posted as a podcast, so you'll be able to comment on that, and we'll talk about it on Monday. All right, guys. Tie one final bow on our coverage here, and of course the Broncos draft. Andre, I'll start with you. Your final statement on the way things shook out over the last 3 days.
This is that offensive draft we dreamed of. It was the wide receiver draft, and the Broncos dove head first. We've been concerned basically all season on the draft pod. How many of these speed receivers could you get? Could you get away maybe with one in this loaded class of wide receivers and all? No, they get 2 plus a third little scratch ticket on top of a really nice class overall. That's what I come away with. Speed.
Henry?
Oh, looks like my video is lagging again. But you know what? Again, it's the speed. You look at Jerry Jeudy, that's great value at 15. You get to 46, you take Hamler. I think that's solid value there. Cushenberry is an incredible value. You know, Agim, we weren't high on, but again, he's well within his range. I really think that especially some of those late round guys too, with the high upsides, those were very good values as well. And I think that John Elway played the board that was given to him, and he played it really well. And I think that there are at least a handful of future starters going into Denver now.
Zach?
The Drew Lock draft. This is what was with three of the first 4 picks, John Elway went out and got Drew Lock guys he needs. 2 weapons, one of them being the best wide receiver in this class. And the third guy is a guy that Drew's going to be touching the rump of every single day in Laura Cushenberry. And then 2 picks later, the Broncos go out and get Drew's good friend, a friendly target, a guy that he balled with and threw 17 touchdowns to at Missouri. This was all about Drew Lock.
And Mace.
Touching the rump ball. This is getting really interesting here at the end.
A cushy rump.
I could have gone with the sweaty cushy rump.
It sounds like something Terry Bradshaw said many years ago in his Hall of Fame induction speech about wanting to put his hands below Mike Webster's butt one more time, and he actually did on the podium there at the time. But it's a kind of a general thought.
I see what you did
there. Yeah. See, nicely done. This is a year unlike any other, and I'm excited about what the Broncos brought in, but you do have a situation where you've got KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, receivers with Drew Lock. It's going to take some time for them to get the chemistry where you want it, and who knows how much work they're going to have in advance of this season. There are going to be moments, I think, where these guys show some tantalizing possibilities, but I know that there's going to be some rough spots along the way, especially this year if they don't have the kind of off-season and training camp to get that timing right. I think there'll be flashes of brilliance this year, but in 2021, I'm really looking forward to seeing what this offense looks like in terms of skill, because this year it may be just another step on the way to what could be by 2021 an amazing and dynamic offense.
For me, it comes down to one thing. I don't want to lose sight of what this is really all about. Yes, there's some great additions here, but the addition of Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion, is going to be transformational for this football team and for this offense and for Drew Lock. And I think we're going to look back on this draft and say this was a good draft. And John Elway stacked his 3rd draft in a row. But for the first time in those drafts, he got a bona fide superstar. And that's what I think Jerry Jeudy is going to be. You see the quotes from people like Mohamed Sanu, who are already saying he's going to be one of the best to ever do it. You see the highlights of him running those routes, and it just looks different. And I trust my eyes when it comes to these things that look different, and it just looks different with Jerry Jeudy. And when I see that, I see superstar potential. So I think all of this has been fun. 3 days of really awesome conversations. But the further we got down the road, the further we got away from Jerry Jeudy. And I do not want to lose sight of that. To me, Jerry Jeudy is going to make this class in spades. And I'm so excited to see what he and Drew Lock can do together. But with that, I want to thank everyone who tuned in with us throughout the last 3 days. It's been so much fun for us. It's been amazing. We want to thank MSU Denver, msudenver.edu/online for making all of this possible. Thank you to all of our people behind the scenes. I can't even name them all, but especially Allie and Rudo for directing and producing that. To Breckenridge Brewery for fueling us all the way along the lines, and to the 4 of you for really helping me carry this coverage. It was amazing. It was awesome, and I appreciate everyone.